After losing her son, Kisagotami was overwhelmed with grief and couldn't accept that her son was gone forever. She would take her son's body with her everywhere she went, holding onto the hope that someone could bring him back to life. Her neighbors and relatives tried to convince her to accept her son's death, but Kisagotami refused to listen to them. One day, Kisagotami heard that the Buddha was in town and went to him with her son's body, seeking his help. The Buddha saw Kisagotami's suffering and decided to teach her an important lesson. He asked Kisagotami to go to every house in the village and find a mustard seed from a family that had not experienced any loss. The Buddha added that the mustard seeds should be collected from a house where nobody had died or suffered from illness or misfortune. Kisagotami went from house to house with her son's body, asking the people for mustard seeds. Initially, she thought that it would be an easy task, but soon realized that every family had experienced some form of suffering. Kisagotami began to feel hopeless as she went to every house and got the same answer. As she went from door to door, Kisagotami began to realize that death is an inevitable part of life. She saw that every family had experienced some form of suffering, whether it was the loss of a loved one or an illness. She saw that death was a part of life and that everyone would have to face it someday. Kisagotami's quest for the mustard seeds had a profound effect on her. She realized that her suffering was not unique and that everyone has to go through the same experience at some point. She saw that holding onto her son's body was only prolonging her grief and that it was time to let go and move on. Finally, after visiting every house in the village, Kisagotami returned to the Buddha. She realized that the mustard seeds were not the important thing. The real lesson was that she had to accept her son's death and move on with her life. The Buddha saw that Kisagotami had learned an important lesson and welcomed her into his community. Kisagotami became a disciple of the Buddha and devoted herself to the practice of meditation and mindfulness. Over time, Kisagotami learned to let go of her attachment to her son's body and found peace in the present moment. She realized that everything in life is impermanent and that clinging to things only brings suffering. The story of Kisagotami teaches us an important lesson about the nature of suffering and the impermanence of life. We all have to face loss and suffering at some point in our lives, but it is up to us to decide how we respond to it. By letting go of our attachments and accepting the impermanence of life, we can find peace and happiness in the present moment. As Kisagotami continued to practice mindfulness and meditation, she began to understand the true nature of existence. She realized that everything in life is impermanent and that clinging to things only brings suffering. She learned that everything that arises will eventually pass away and that nothing is permanent. Kisagotami also realized that the suffering she experienced was not unique to her alone. She saw that everyone around her, even the Buddha, had experienced suffering at some point in their lives. But instead of dwelling on their pain, they had learned to accept it and move on. With this newfound understanding, Kisagotami became more compassionate toward others. She began to offer her help to those who were struggling, using her own experiences to offer comfort and guidance. Kisagotami's transformation was not easy, and it did not happen overnight. It took time and effort to let go of her attachments and accept the impermanence of life. But with dedication and perseverance, she was able to find peace and happiness in the present moment. The story of Kisagotami is a reminder that suffering is a part of life, but it does not have to define us. By practicing mindfulness and compassion, we can learn to accept our pain and find peace in the present moment. We can learn to let go of our attachments and find joy in the simple things in life. The story also teaches us the importance of seeking help when we are struggling. Kisagotami went to the Buddha seeking help, and he offered her guidance and support. It is important to remember that we do not have to face our problems alone. We can always seek the help of others, whether it is from family, friends, or a mental health professional. In conclusion, the story of Kisagotami is a powerful reminder of the impermanence of life and the importance of accepting our pain. By letting go of our attachments and practicing mindfulness and compassion, we can find peace and happiness in the present moment.